Okay, so does everybody understand the format? Just so everybody understands the format. Right, so there's 2 members of each team. The first speaker from each team will go and give his pitch for 2 minutes. The topic is DC versus Marvel, which is best, right? And then after both speakers go, they have cross-examination for 3 minutes. Then the second speaker from each team goes, cross-examination, and they each get 3 minutes, cross-examination for 3 minutes. And then, so, which one are you guys, DC?
Yep, DC.
And then DC will do their rebuttal, 2 minutes. Marvel will do their rebuttal for 2 minutes. And then audience questions, right? And then judges, you give your ruling.
All right, hello everybody. So I'm just gonna be talking about why DC is better than Marvel. First of all, DC has many comics. All right, they are very successful in the comic making business. They talk a lot about more serious topics than Marvel, and honestly, they're just better in every way. And also, they developed a lot of ideas for characters such as Darkseid, and Marvel has stole those ideas, like Thanos. Because a couple years after Darkseid came out in the comics, Marvel happened to just finally think of Thanos and just bring him into the universe. And also, one key thing in DC's universe is a multiverse. And basically, in the '60s, there was a Flash comic that was discussing, or that had the Flash delve into the multiverse and all that jazz. And then about 17 years later, Marvel decided to have its first time to do a multiverse, probably because DC was so successful and made such a good story from it. And
2 minutes.
There was also many movies that DC has made, and even though they might not be live action, they made tons of animated movies, and those movies have gotten a very large fan base. And they've even had many crossovers in their comics, which helps, which is more for, they have had a lot of crossovers, which helps fans see their favorite fantasies about their characters meeting other characters from other fantasies come to real life. They've even had crossover games like Mortal Kombat X Injustice, and in Injustice, even had crossover characters such as Mortal Kombat characters and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, from all these ideas, DC is just superior because of the fact that they're so open to new ideas, they think of a lot of original ideas, and they don't fear about going into dark topics and making thrilling stories from them. I think that's the end of my arguments.
All right, so I'm representing the Marvel side today, and we're going to talk about a bit how Marvel has just proved their superiority throughout these past few decades of them being a company. So throughout, if you talk with your parents or even yourself, you can see that Marvel has a huge influence on today's society. I mean, the live-action multiverse of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a very big hit right now, and it's shown very large success, inspiring lots of different filmmakers and giving new opportunities to different stories. There's also lots of big successes in other franchises, such as the X-Men and Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, which has all been huge successes in the early 2000s and now our modern day. Now, if you think back to like when you're talking with your parents about all their childhood nostalgia, a lot of the things that come up is superheroes, and one of the biggest superheroes from that time was Spider-Man. And the creator of Spider-Man, Stan Lee, had such a huge impact creating Marvel, and it's his brilliant mind just created so many new superheroes and new things. Some of the concepts may be the same. A lot of the original concepts derived way before DC, such as the multiverse has been a theory for a very long time, way before DC. And that while DC did adapt it before Marvel took it in their own direction, creating taking a different spin on it, such as alternate realities. And yeah. Yeah, Ryan, tell me a little bit about DC's Rogues Gallery and how they are superior to Marvel.
Can you restate the question, please?
Tell me about DC's Rogues Gallery, their villains.
Wait, what was the?
How would you say that DC's villains are good?
Oh, DC's villains, they, since DC is more leading over to the dark aspect of stories, they're not really afraid to make their villains darker or more evil. While in Marvel, I believe that their Marvel heroes are more, or villains are more like kid friendly in my opinion. But DC makes thrilling heroes, especially like Darkseid. His name is literally called Darkseid, and he shoots lasers out of his eyes. He's just a great villain in my opinion. There's also the Joker, who, I don't know who doesn't know the Joker. There's so many things that is dark about him. There's so many stories, and there's also so many very intriguing and entertaining things about him.
2 minutes.
I would personally argue that DC's villains are sort of plain in a way. Like Darkseid, he doesn't really have any motives and any intentions that really drive him. He's just evil in general. Versus with Thanos, he has like a drive and he has a personal backstory where his true intentions in his mind are good. And so I think in Marvel, the villains actually have a lot more depth. And also, there's a lot more difference between the villains. Just so many different, countless, beings with different powers and different, some of them don't even have powers, but they use their mind to counter to it, where a lot of the DC villains are very similar.
Well, I believe that a good villain is usually just evil through and through. Like, when we get a villain that is trying to do things good, but they do things evil, sure, that is sometimes a good story, but also you need to have villains that are just plain out evil. They do things for evil motives or for evil things. So I believe that that's what also makes a good villain, and also that's exactly why the Joker was created and is so loved by a lot of people, was the fact that Joker is someone who's crazy. He does things for no apparent reason at times, and it's just what makes him a great character.
I know, but I feel like yes, you can have evil, but evil for evil, just to be evil, is not necessarily always a good thing. There's always you always want to have motives, or else there's no driving story, driving factor, or reason why. Because heroes, you can see they always have a driving factor and a driving motive to do stuff. But it's always good to see that on the villain side too.
Well, the villains do have it. They want to do things just for an evil purpose or to gain more power. That's why they want to be evil. So can we ask other questions out related?
6 seconds.
Okay. So if Spider-Man was so successful, then why did they make 3 movies and then a bunch of movies?
Okay, so my first reason DC is better is because they're not in it for the money. They're in it for inspiring kids and everyone in the world. Like, for example, Wonder Woman, in 1941, she was created, and the reason she was created was to inspire and motivate people during World War II and get them through the hard times. And she's a woman figure, so it really helped the people that had to deal with it and the women that had to deal. And Batman, and it's more realistic. Like Batman, it gives inspiration to people that think they're normal and proves that they could do stuff that humans can. Like Superman, he's really strong and perfect. He's a perfect template for a superhero, and he's copied many other times. Like if you've seen the show Invincible, the character is copied, and everyone knows Superman as the perfect hero. But even though they're great heroes, they also have conflicts within and have problems. Like Batman, he's not perfect, so when he was growing old, he has really internal conflicts about how he had to bring everyone together, and he's a perfect leader. And Wonder Woman had internal stuff
2 minutes.
Wonder Woman has internal stuff whether she should venture into the world and help save the world, or if she should stay isolated on her island. And now on to the cartoons. I hope everyone's seen the Justice League cartoons. They're very good. They have 98% ratings compared to Marvel's unsuccessful cartoons, where they had in the 60% or 70% ratings. And yeah, and the cartoons, much better. In cartoons, DC follows a storyline and doesn't repeat, while the comics for Marvel, they Spider-Man got repeated multiple times. And on that point, the movies Spider-Man, that trilogy has been repeated 3 different times in the exact same way, that shows that they were unsuccessful, and all the remakes are kind of become fails. Like the Fantastic Four, their remake was a big flop, and they didn't do stuff. And the character development of Marvel is just not good. Like, everyone loved Hulk in the first movies and how strong he was, but then in Endgame, they knew he was too strong, and they wanted to make it a more PG-13 type thing. So they like weakened him, and he wasn't very strong at all, and they turned him more human, and all his anger was gone. And Thor, everyone in Infinity War and everything loved him, but then randomly in Endgame, he just became weak, fat, and couldn't do anything for himself, and he was less athletic.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm making the argument that Marvel is better, and I will be doing this through multiple topics, like the movies. We'll start with the movies. So with the MCU is the highest grossing film franchise in history with $22.56 billion, which compared to the DCEU, that's many times the amount of it. And then you also have other movies like Fantastic Four, which is also another great movie, and X-Men, which has also grossed billions of dollars. Then you will have obviously the Spider-Man franchises, in which there was a Spider-Man trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man, which were not a part of the MCU. And both of those are also very popular, and those were made in the 2000s, which led to the superheroes becoming more popular in movies. Then we have comics. So comics, Marvel actually has the two most popular comics in history, with the best-selling X-Men, #1, selling 8 billion copies, or 8 million copies, which is a couple of times greater than Superman and Batman comics sold for. And the second most, X-Force, selling 5 million. Then they also have products. So Marvel has sold $1.3 billion of Superman or Spider-Man products in 2014. Now DC's highest selling product is Batman, which sold for under $500 million. So Marvel has sold over double, close to triple the amount of products in that. And then you also have games, like video games. So Marvel has Marvel's Spider-Man, which was nominated for Game of the Year in 2018, as well as Spider-Man Miles Morales, which was a more recently made video game, which is also very popular and had won awards for Best Character. Then you have the TV shows, which Marvel has recently made developments and has made many more TV shows recently, with WandaVision receiving very high audience ratings, and also an MTV Movie and TV Award for Best Show, Actress, Villain, and Best Fight Scene, actually. And then you also have Falcon and Winter Soldier, which has awards for Best Hero and Best On-Screen Duo with Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then the last argument I would like to make is that Stan Lee
30 seconds.
has made Marvel, and everyone knows Stan Lee. Stan Lee is an icon for his cameos in all the comics he's made and all the movies he's been a part of and the network he's created. Marvel is very well known and has forever changed how movies will be made. Thank you.
Brody.
Okay, the first question I would like to ask you is, what movie do you think is the best movie that DC has made out of any movie?
My favorite personally are the Batman trilogies. Everyone knows them, everyone loves them. They had the best villains, they had the Joker, Bane, and all the good characters. Those are my favorites.
But you said that Spider-Man movies were carried out too much and it made the story less well known, but then you just named Batman movies, which have many more movies.
That is not what I said. I was stating that Spider-Man was unsuccessful because although Batman did 3 different stories and they were all different, while Spider-Man tried to start 3 different times. They failed the first 2 times, so they had to keep making the same story over and over, did the same exact stuff, but just with different actors. Now onto my question. You said Fantastic Four was successful. If it was so successful, why did it have terrible ratings and why did they try to make a remake out of it?
So its ratings actually weren't that bad. Its ratings were better than many DC
2
movies.
minutes.
DC EU movies, for instance, Suicide Squad, which had a 29% Rotten Tomatoes score and only a 59% audience score. And then also there's Justice League, which also had a very, very bad rating, like Rotten Tomatoes score of 40 and an audience score of just above that.
Well, some of the movies may flop. Some of them are amazing. Like Joker. Have you seen Joker?
Joker's Joker's ratings aren't better than like movies like Thor 2, which is considered one of the worst MCU movies. Joker's ratings are 68% Rotten Tomato, with a 88% audience score. Well, Thor 2 movie is 67% Rotten Tomato.
You just said Thor was 67, but you said
Thor
the audience
2.
score of Suicide Squad or Justice League was 88%.
No.
Is that what you said? That you just said?
For that audience score, which is usually higher than critic score, in some cases, for Joker is 60.
Since you love ratings so much, let's talk about how the Justice League, the Flash
1
Paradox,
minute.
had a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and everyone loved it, and all the cartoon Justice Leagues did amazing.
Yeah, so for the Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, for the Rotten Tomato, it did score 100%, but it also had only 18 reviews. Meanwhile, Endgame has had 541 reviews and has been able to make a 94% Rotten Tomato. So you tell me which one's better.
Well, you mentioned quantity over quality. I think quality is much more important.
30 seconds.
And that true fans that are willing to do watch the less popular stuff, but they knew it was amazing and rated it very high. And I mentioned the Flashpoint. You have statistics on that. You want to read some from that?
From
That
what,
was
The
had
Flash?
great ratings.
The
It was
Flash is
100%.
89% Rotten Tomatoes, 65% viewer rating. Meanwhile, if you want to go to, just pick any TV show from Marvel.
Oh, that's time.
Alright, so I'm just gonna fix up the movies and stuff. Sure, there may not be a lot of reviews, for the latest movie. However, or for the latest animated movie. However, there's countless films just made for the DC universe that are animated, and they have their small fan base. They're all over the place. You can find one of probably any DC story, and usually these stories they have great voice actors. They include different stories that DC hasn't even covered in the movies yet. So you can see how maybe let's say Justice League movie that fights Darkseid will go out compared to how the Darkseid movie that came out just now for Justice League.
Okay, so our whole argument is quality over quantity. All they mentioned were reviews and how much money they made and the popularity. But for us, multiple shows and multiple movies of DC, like the Justice League and all of those, were very successful and had 100% ratings and were very good. And I'd even argue that's better if it was lower or for like less audience, because that means they're probably more like knowledgeable about it, and they'll probably have harsher ratings because they're more experienced with certain things like that. While everyone just likes to follow the herd with Marvel and is like, oh, that movie was so good, it's so popular. But in reality, they're just forcing stuff and doing stuff for
30 seconds.
Views. Now, one last thing I'd like to mention is DC has been a template for many superheroes in different things, such as the Boys. The main villain, or the main superhero villain, is a guy that is basically Superman. And Superman is essentially just a template for a bunch of other works of art that use Superman as sort of a way to show how a superhero is supposed to.
Time.
Alright, so I'm gonna make this fast. I want to quickly touch on your point about Wonder Woman that you made earlier. So you had talked about how Wonder Woman was a strong inspiration for females. And so actually, if we take a look at the earlier comics where Wonder Woman was first introduced in the 90s, Wonder Woman was very over-sexualized through the comic art. And I don't think that was very inspiring to women. I think it was more as a play for the male audience. Whereas if you take a look at the Marvel comics, such strong female characters such as like Captain Marvel and Black Widow made like huge strides while not having to make those sacrifices to pull in other audiences. And then I also want to talk about a bit of the movies. If we look at the Spider-Man franchise, while you did say that there was a couple reboots, if we look at the Batman series, there was multiple Batman series which just got one film and then they were rebooted. For Spider-Man had 2 to 3 films in each of the series, and then they rebooted. A lot of the restarts were because of the age of the actors, because Peter Parker in the comics is more portrayed as like a high school and young college student, whereas those were well in their late 20s.
Okay, and so you also brought up the point that Marvel has apparently stolen many characters in the entire multiverse. Well, DC actually stole Aquaman from Marvel's very first creation, which was Namor the Submariner. And actually, I don't believe that it makes any difference who made it first, because we're arguing who's better, not who made it first. Also, if you look at Spider-Man, going back to Spider-Man, Spider-Man has way better reviews than pretty much almost all Batman movies for each super.
Yeah.
Super.
The Sam Raimi franchise is, I mean, it's what sparked a lot of the superhero movies, including the DCEU, and sparked a lot of like the beginnings that inspired people.
I have a question for DC. You said that you were arguing for quality over quantity, but DC is very inconsistent on their movies and their ratings and how good they are, which I want to say strives towards quality, and there's a lot of them. What do you have to say in defense of that?
Well, the movies that you're probably referencing are the live action movies, and while those movies may have not gotten as good of ratings, I can assure you that the animated movies have gotten a quite large fan base going on, and if there's the fact that they're still making new ones just shows to you how popular and successful that they could be.
Down to that. I mean, if you look at the general audience, so the majority of the audience of like that's consuming the DC and Marvel franchises do view the movies, and very small actually watch the released animated films. I don't think that the relevancy of how that is.
Well, our whole argument was quality, not quantity, as we say again. And you said that DC comes out with a lot of quantity for like, I'm guessing you're referencing live action, but Marvel comes out with much more movies per year and a lot more shows. Well, no, not shows, but a lot more movies, which you were referencing.
That's because
And every single Marvel movie is successful, especially in the MCU, with their average ratings being 85 and 82.
proving that they have stronger bases to go off of.
Is that percentage?
That is percentage.
Another question. I have a question for DC. You say you're focusing on quality over quantity. How would you measure quality as a statistic? Can you give me numbers on because you keep on bringing up the animated films, and yet we got no numbers on how you're measuring that.
Well, we used Rotten Tomatoes. It's the audience and experts rating the movies. And for example, as I mentioned, Justice League, The Flash Paradox, it had 100% Rotten Tomato rating, which I don't think any Marvel movie, show, comic, or any of that had. And many others, like The Dark Apocalyptic, also had 100%. And it was the Justice League versus the Fatal 5, it also had 100%. That's multiple shows that had 100% quality ratings, while I don't think any Marvel or DC had near that.
You don't have to raise your hand. Brody, you don't have to raise your hand, you just have to cut in.
Okay, so first of all, you keep on saying Justice League, the Dark Apocalyptic. It's called the Dark Apocalyptic War. So I don't even think he's seen it, because it's so unheard of. No one really cares about a show that has like 18 reviews.
If I were to spend some time making an animated film and I released it and then had a couple of my friends, maybe 18 of them, give it 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, it might be have a 100% score too.
Also, he talked about The Flash and other shows being high reviewed. Flash is 89% Rotten Tomato, 65% audience score. Well, WandaVision has a higher audience score and matches it with the Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, apparently you weren't listening, because I wasn't referring to Flash. I was referring to Justice League, The Flash Paradox, which had 100%.
Which also no one's heard of. So I would argue
Apparently
that
not
Okay, another question.
The Marvel team, you guys talked a lot, the second speaker in particular, talked a lot about how much revenue Marvel has made with their movies. How is that relevant to which company is better? Which films are better?
Well, if you're going based on company, I would argue the better company is the one that makes more. But if we're going based on actual quality, it means that people care more. Because there has been 23 Marvel movies leading up to Endgame. And that means that people have watched the earlier ones and then they loved it some more, so they came back for Endgame, making Endgame the second largest grossing box office movie.
Also proving that the structure that the entire cinematic universe is built around, which film, like an entire universe building up to a climactic event. The writers felt so strong that like they had a strong base, the Marvel comics, that they could still continue to be successful up until the point of their final Endgame movies.
So I have a question for both teams, mainly for DC. I think one of the big things that you have to look at is the companies that own the universes, particularly Disney and Warner Brothers. And over the past month to a year, Warner Brothers has become under much fire for what they choose to release for their audience and who they choose to hire to take certain projects, seen by Zack Snyder's Justice League and the call for more of the Snyderverse. And I think that you have to judge what best universe, you have to judge based on who owns the universe and who controls it. So what's your rebuttal to those who think that Warner Brothers itself brings down DC to such a low level?
I don't think that Warner Brothers brings down DC to a low level because it's the company that owns it. However, DC has been making comics for years, and for those years, it wasn't owned by Warner Brothers. So to say that Warner Brothers is the reason why DC isn't a good story or universe is something that I don't believe should be said.
Warner Brothers has actually impacted like Justice League, because Justice League, as I mentioned, they're terrible reviews. They had to come out with a Zack Snyder cut just to make the reviews match or are still under Marvel, just to make the movie okay to watch.
Yeah, and to add on top of that, from a lot of the internal experiences, especially with the actor who portrayed Cyborg, a lot of his stuff was cut from the film, just because the DC execs at Warner Brothers chose that it wouldn't be appropriate to add, taking away from a lot of the minority representation, and also a lot of Gal Gadot's threatening of her career because of Warner Brothers. I don't think that's very appropriate of the company, and I think it really drags down the entire franchise as a whole.
I have a question for DC. Do you have any response to Marvel's argument about the sexualization of Wonder Woman in the early years and how that was derogatory towards women?
Well, yes, I actually do. Well, he mentioned how all the motivation was created in the 90s and it was over-sexualized. That is completely wrong. Wonder Woman was created in the 40s during World War II that motivated women during war and to help support the Allies and to say that we got this, we could win, we're strong enough. And it had nothing to do with sexualization, and he mentioned the 90s.
I also want to point out that you said Black Widow and I forget the other person you said. Captain Marvel, yes. Those two characters. I'm pretty sure that or at least Black Widow is over-sexualized as well. So if you want to talk about how Marvel or DC is the only company that
we didn't make an argument she was a role model, although she is. She is sold with the Avengers products like toys and stuff for children, and those are overwhelmingly bought more than Wonder Woman products.
Yeah, and also I said that the comic art where Wonder Woman was portrayed profusely was in the 90s, is what I was referencing. Not that Wonder Woman was created in the 90s.
It was a refutation. It was like you're saying that I was wrong because I said the creation was because to motivate. And you're like, no, they were over-sexualizing it. It was hurting. It was not helping women at all. But the whole point of her was to motivate women in the 40s and get us through the war and help us and motivate us.
Okay, Nathan, you got a question?
No, I'm not anymore.
Does anybody got any more questions? Okay.
I just feel like they were much more organized. Marvel was much more organized, I feel. They were calmer in delivering their speeches. I just felt they were more organized. I thought that they had better points and better responses to the other team's points.
DC had a lot of good proving points from about the animations and the comics because they're more popular for that. But Marvel was more focusing about the reviews and stuff. But what people don't realize, Marvel is so new with like Endgame, Infinity War, that a bunch of those reviews are solely off of people just rating like one certain actor, Tom Holland, Chris Hemsworth. A lot of people just watch the movies just for those actors.
I don't think that, and DC never proved that. So I don't understand how I can agree with that argument if DC never proved that.
I think that DC's argument that they're less kid-friendly, that they're less towards making money in franchising was really good, and none of Marvel's arguments ever argued that, and all they did was kind of support it, saying, oh, well, we're kid-friendly, oh, we're inspiration.
I don't understand how they proved that Marvel was only in it for the money. They only said that Marvel sold less movies.
I didn't see that. I'm saying that they never had an argument that they were less gritty, that they were less serious. That's more what DC was saying in the second speech, which is what kind of brought me to Marvel. Alright, so what's your argument? I'm going DC.
I'm going to Marvel.
Alright, the judges have a decision.
So the judges made a 2-1 decision to vote in favor of DC. You want to say why?
One, you wore the suit, that's what.
Are you being serious?
No, that's not.
I was gonna say, you made fun of yourself. You can't.
They also made a lot more eye contact, and I feel that their arguments, about how it was, grittier, it was more serious, was a lot more.
That's why it's really
supporting to their argument that it's better, rather than all you guys were talking about was reviews and amount of money made. Which all that kind of did was make me think, oh yeah, so that's all Marvel is doing, is trying to franchise it toward young kids, while they did make the argument that it was serious, and you guys never refuted that.
Serious with an animated movie.
Well, I know DC is also a lot of most of DC fans were really liked the comics and their animations, and the movies were kind of after that. And I feel like the comics kind of set them up for the movies, which the movies like Batman kind of still like flew. And Marvel was like I heard like some like information about Marvel movies and how successful they were, but they didn't really go into too much of their comics and like kind of their story lore. They just wanted to get like say the revenue and all the ratings on how popular and how like all their actors were like so famous.